Hi, my name is Andrew Sears and I'm the president of City Vision University, and I'm going to give you an overview of the course Vocation, Calling, and the Purpose of Work. Just to give you a quick outline of the course, what you're going to be doing in the course is the first part you're going to be reading through a book called The Startup of You, and the idea behind that book is basically viewing your own career as if it's a business, and how do you manage it as if it's a business or a business startup and develop a life plan. So that's going to be the first couple weeks. The second part is going to go a little deeper, and we're going to get into some tools that, it's one thing to come up with a plan. It's another thing to really understand your core values, understand more of, who you are, and to do some reflection around that. And that's one of the significant aspects I think that makes City Vision different, is that we try to go deeper. And then in weeks 5 and 6, we're going to be going through really looking at worldview, faith, and work. And then in week 7, we're going to have a rough draft of the final project, peer feedback, and then week 8 is going to be the final project. So let me tell you about the final project. It's something you should work on each week. This is a senior level course or a graduate level course, so it's going to be a good amount of work, and most of your grade is going to be, I can't remember whether it's 60 or more percent of your grade is going to be in this final project. So you should be working on it every week. If you wait till the last minute, you're probably going to fail the course. So be sure you are doing the weekly assignments. The first part, you're going to be reviewing the books you went through, writing a book review. You're also going to do 1-paragraph video reviews of the key videos that you go through, just summarizing them and your reflections on them. The main part is section 2, which is going to be vocational reflection and life plan. For graduate students, that's going to be 15 to 25 pages, and for undergraduates, it's going to be 10 to 15 pages. That's double-spaced pages. And there's going to be 4 parts to that. So part 1 is going to be your personal life plan. That's going to correspond to week 1 and 2. Part 2 and 3 are going to focus on your own story and your identity and unique calling. And then part 4 is where you're going to talk about your worldview and the role of work in your grand narrative. And then at the end, we're going to just have 2 pages where you do your own self-evaluation, reflection on the course, but also each of our courses we view as open source, and we want you to suggest resources for the next time we go through the course. So with that, that's the overview of the course. I'm going to get into some of the key concepts within the course. So Frederick Buechner has often said that your calling is the place God calls you to, is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And what I want to do is I want to break that out into 4 different questions. So that really make up your calling. So one question is, what are you good at? And then another question is, what do you enjoy? The third question is, will the world pay for it? And does the world need that? So what happens with most people in their calling is they get off balance. They'll focus too much on 1 or 2 of these, and their calling gets thrown off, because you really need to balance all 4 of these to be successful in your calling. So let me talk about how this works. So the top 2, what are you good at and what the world will pay for, those are really focused on status. So early in my career, I decided to be an electrical engineer, and the reason why I did it is I was told I was good at math, and it was the highest paying job at the time, so I went to be an electrical engineer. I won tons of awards. I went to MIT. I co-founded a research group, one of the fathers of the internet. I lived my life for status. That was not balanced. There were parts of my life that I looked at for meaning also. So that's the bottom part, and that's what do you enjoy and what does the world need. So I'd actually go and I would volunteer working at rescue missions and Christian homeless shelters, and I had part of my life for meaning, but I hadn't figured out how do I integrate those 2. Then there's other people who are focused on the left side, and that's, what are you good at, what do you enjoy. So that's typically, going to be an artist. Um, and the right side is external motivation. Where's the world's deep hunger? Um, so, if you just focus on the top, you end up getting status without meaning. So I had all these great awards. My first job after college, I was making $200 an hour, but I felt empty. Um, the so that's if you just focus on the top. If you focus on the bottom, you do meaning without status. That's, essentially financially unsustainable. So that's what volunteering is, and and if all you do is volunteer, you're going to starve basically. So if you just focus on the left side, where it's focus on your internal motivation, you're going to be underemployed or the starving artist. There's tons of artists and they end up working a menial job, and there's nothing wrong with that, but often it's because they didn't plan to have more balance, and they're barely getting by because they didn't ask for, the question of, will the world pay for something, and does the world need it? A good example for this for me is I love to play basketball. I'm fairly good at basketball, but I'm not good enough to play in the NBA, and the world doesn't need another second-rate guy playing basketball. So there's plenty of cases, and that's actually a good example, because more and more in the economy, people are calling it the superstar economy. So there's many sectors of the economy where you're either a superstar or you can't get a job. So that's important to look at. And then the last part is being externally motivated. So I would say at one point in my life, I was very focused on social justice. I was working in nonprofits, working among the poor, living among the poor. And I was looking at, does the world need this? What are the world's, I was need motivated. But ultimately, I experienced burnout through that. And a lot of the people I worked with, even though they knew their work was meaningful, they lost joy in that. So, and looking at your vocation, it's important to balance all four of those. So as we're going through this course, I want you to be, reflecting on your own calling and how can you, balance those. Now, one way that people balance those sometimes is they'll be bivocational. Early on, I said I worked these high status jobs and I would volunteer. That's completely valid. The artist who does work a job that they don't enjoy, so they can do art. That's also valid, but there's also validity in trying to integrate those two. So that's one way of thinking about vocation. Another way, this course originally was called Theology of Work, and really what that term is, it's what's God's purposes for work. Increasingly, City Vision's having both Christian and non-Christian students, so we've reformed this course so that it's going to be accessible for people whether they're Christian or non-Christian. And each person, regardless, they have a worldview, they'll have a purpose. And the human vocation, at least this is how Christians would often view it, is that we're co-creators. We're to be creative. We're to build the world. Now, the Christian vocation is summarized, by Jesus. He said that there's really two laws: love God, love others. And all Christians are bound by that. Now, non-Christians may not necessarily be bound by that, but then within that large domain, there's a smaller domain of what's your personal vocation. And vocation is another way of saying, your life purpose. It I would say is a more weighty way of viewing career. Now, for people who look at Christian vocation, they'll often break it up into 5 or 6 different areas. So, one is going to be, this is work often, your service to society, stewardship and mission, your service to your neighbor. Then many people will volunteer in their congregation. You'll have a role in your family. You'll have a role to yourself, your personal spirituality, and then you'll have, in the Christian worldview, you'll have a Sabbath. So rest, play, worship and celebration. So that's just a quick overview. But what I want to do is I want to take a step back and to talk a little more. One of the videos you're going to go through this week is this concept called causal layered analysis. And part of what makes City Vision unique is a lot of schools and universities, they're just going to focus on, let's just get you the jobs. They're not going to look at things deeper. Now, the idea behind causal layered analysis is that you have a problem. You can think of any type of problem. You could say, it's global warming, or you could say my problem is that I want a better job, or things along those lines. And then so that's the, you hear the tip of the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg only shows 1/10 of the iceberg. But what's under that? Under that are causes, and you can do some more rational thought to think about those things. And you can do some systemic analysis. And then under the causes really often is worldview. And the causes often can take years to change. Worldview, sometimes can take decades to change. And you're talking about paradigms, mental models, culture, and values. But even below that, beyond just the iceberg itself, is the entire ocean the iceberg's floating in. That's the metaphors, the myths. It's the societal and civilizational issues, the archetypes, and what we call the I would say kind of global civilizational worldview. So why is this important? Well, what I want to talk about is what's the dominant metaphor for your career? What's the worldview that's driving your career? So for me, I grew up poor, and I had a lot of my friends who are getting addicted to drugs in high school, and a lot of them were going to jail. My first job actually was working at a Burger King restaurant, and that restaurant actually also dealt drugs out of there. And at the beginning it was a good experience, but by the end it was a horrible experience. And the entire time I went through school, my motivation was I had to do really well through school, or I was going to be back working at this horrible job that was essentially a drug house, and that was really my only other plan B. So my analogy was this picture here. It was a tightrope walker, and that served me for a while, but I think that is a metaphor that doesn't allow for opportunities to make mistakes. So another possible metaphor, and I would say this is more the dominant metaphor that I've had as I've gotten older, is the metaphor of GPS and rerouting. So for those of you who've used GPS, it's a map, and it shows where you are on the map, and if you make a wrong turn, it will say rerouting. So for a lot of you in your careers, you've made some wrong turns. For me, even in high school, doing a lot of partying and things along those lines, I made some wrong turns in that, but there's the opportunity to reroute. So the idea, as long as you're paying attention to your GPS and you're not ignoring it, then you're not going to go completely off route. You might miss a turn, but you can focus on your GPS, and you're going to be rerouting. So I would say that's a more powerful analogy for the tightrope. And for many people, the tightrope actually was somewhat descriptive of my situation starting off. But even if I fell off the tightrope, and I've known a lot of my friends who have, and say they get addicted, they break a leg, and it's going to take them 5 more years, but they can enter recovery. They can still use that GPS. So that's the power of metaphor. So let me use another example. And this actually, I would say, is probably the bigger example that's caused me problems in my work career. Early on, because I had this tightrope mentality, I would say I was a perfectionist, and that creates some benefits, but it also, if you ever know a perfectionist, can create a downside. So I would say that another dominant metaphor in my career is the idea of a war zone. So I grew up in inner city, not very good neighborhood, where everyone I knew was, I got involved in hundreds of fights. There is, gross abuse all the way around with everyone I knew, and my best friend, he, ended up going and working in the ER in war, and he said, you know what, it wasn't that different than our neighborhood. And that was really the picture I had too. Now the problem is having that war metaphor serves you while you're in the battlefield, but as you get out of the battlefield, as you get into the work environment, and you hear this with post-traumatic stress disorders, people come back from war and then they end up, shooting someone, and or they end up, getting in a fight, or they do something. So, employers don't want people who are trigger happy, that all it takes is threatening to kill your boss once and you lose your job, right? So, but a lot of us will come from backgrounds that, where there's challenge. And the question is, how do we heal that? That's going to be a bigger problem. You can get all the education you want, but if you're emotionally trigger happy, and if it's hard to, not go off on people, then you're going to have a much bigger, part of your iceberg that you need to work on. So, so if this is the dominant metaphor for life, then you're going to have challenge. Let me just propose an alternative metaphor. So this is a metaphor of a child being held by his mother. That's a metaphor of safety, a metaphor of comfort. Employers want people who feel secure. They don't want employees who are going to be shooting people if they think that, they do them wrong. So why am I talking all about this in metaphor? Why do we have this course that we feel like is a critical part of many of our degrees, especially our business degree, and any career that you do? The reason is, you start with the tip of the iceberg, and everyone wants a good job. So that's the problem. If you got a good job, you want a better job. If you don't have a job, you want a job, right? So then you go under that and you say, what are the causes? So you're here getting an education right now. So one of your causes is you think you need more education. And if you go a little deeper than that, you're going to realize, I need better people skills. Everyone needs better people skills. So it's not that, you have bad people skills. It's just you need better people skills. And then, you'll also realize that I need access to opportunity. Some of that could be the credential that a degree provides. Some of it could be the network that you can open up. And all this fits into part one of this course. So I'm really going through an outline of what we're going to cover in this course. So you start off, you say, I want to get a good job. Part one is really where you're going to rationally think about that. And you're going to do analysis, and you're going to come up with a personal life plan on that. And that's something that's really important. But there's something deeper than that. So deeper than that really is your own personal worldview. And you have to look at your own story. And there's a lot of tools for reflecting on your own identity. And then you get to what's the next layer beyond just education? Well, you need values that are going to bring you success. You need a transformation of your own worldview. Like I said, I had to move from the High Wire Act and from the war zone to one that is going to be more supportive. You need acculturation. I grew up poor. I didn't know which fork was the right fork to eat. I didn't know how to talk. I talked like I was, from the inner city, and I, if someone wronged me, my first thing was to get in a fight with them, and that's, not good acculturation. I mean, that's not good culture. And what acculturation is, and acculturation is important, it's, a big term, but it's different than assimilation. Assimilation is, I'm going to become exactly like you. What acculturation is, it says, I'm going to learn your language because I have to operate in your world. And in many cases, pretty much throughout the world, there's going to be people who are in power who have different cultures than you. So you need to be able to speak their language. You need to be able to be bilingual, bicultural. So you need to get that acculturation. And then I would say the last thing you need to do is you need emotional and relational health. So that's going to get into your own personal worldview. But beyond just your personal worldview, and the Western world's very focused. It's all about me. It's Facebook and YouTube. But really it's not just our story, it's how do we do this collectively. So it's the collective worldview. So part 4 goes into a collective worldview, and you need a community of support with a healthy, comprehensive worldview. So that's going to be part 4. So this is the outline for the course. This is the outline for your major project. And as you go through this course, I hope that will convince you that, just saying I want a good job, that's not how you get a good job. Just getting an education, I've met a ton of people who are unemployable. They have plenty fine credentials, but they can't be supervised. They can't, work with other people. So how do you get that transformation in worldview? How do you get so I think that you have to go through additional layers, and that is a big part of what we're going to do in this course. So if you have any questions, ask the instructor, and hopefully you'll find this course helpful. I've heard from other students that this is one of the most transformative courses that they've taken. So please put the effort into the course because it can be transformative to you. In many ways, you can think of this as an iceberg. You'd also think of it as an onion. You're peeling layers of the onion. And how do you get to the deeper layers of yourself so that as you reflect on your calling and your purpose, how do you get the most powerful calling and purpose that's going to maximize your success in the world? And that's really what this course is about. So thanks a lot.